Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our talks today. I'm so thrilled today to be talking to the fantastic team with Apple TV Plus's new TV show Swagger. We are joined by the wonderful Reggie Rock Bythewood, who is the creator, showrunner, director, writer, and executive producer, O'Shea Jackson Jr., and Quvenzhané Wallis. And Reggie, I wanted to start with a question for you in the way that you're telling this story, because it's not just about the external aspect of the game itself and even the external aspects of the industry. There's a lot about the psychological aspects of what it means to even try to become a professional player as a high school student, what it means to have tried and almost reached that pinnacle in the past. And so I was interested in the way that you shaped this show, how exploring so many of the internal aspects for these characters within the game of basketball, how that helped to really shape a lot of aspects within the lead characters for you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mara. I mean, in many ways, this is a redemption story for our character Ike. His career kind of mirrors where Jace is at this kind of pivotal point in his life. And so, really was just interested in telling this narrative where, you know, we on the surface think, this player needs his coach, but we come to find out the coach needs, Ike needs Jace as much as Jace needs Ike. But I would say just even beyond that, so much of it is really about like reaching your dreams or what you have to go through to try to get there. And so just even in our title Swagger, which, I like to say like on the surface is about bravado and confidence. Really what we discover through our characters, Swagger is really about having a cause bigger than yourself. And so that's what we see in Jace and Ike and all the sort of we see that with Crystal and all the sort of connections that our characters make as they come together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And O'Shea, I feel like that also gives your character so much richness because there's so many elements of backstory, and we're getting so many more details in every single episode about what it meant for your player to be on the precipice of a career like that, and also a lot of the emotional fallout that comes with that. And it really feels like a character who has been doing a lot of internal work on himself over the years, and he's successful at it in a lot of ways, but there's still the quiet moments where it sneaks up on him because his past is all around him, coaching the other teams. The industry is still trying to come to his players in the same way that they came to him. And so, how did that give you so much richness and so much layering that you then were able to bring to your performance because of all that detailing that Reggie's created?
Well, what I really, this is my first series, especially of this magnitude. So, what I really liked is this is my first time with a character where, my arc and my time with him is stretched out so much further than I've ever had to deal with. When you do a film, you only got an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to get so much compressed in. And with a series like this, you get to grow a little bit. And something that I really looked into when it came to Ike's relationship with Jace is our relationship starts off first almost like competitors, and then it kind of builds into big brother little brother, and then it builds into almost father and son towards the end. And you can't skip steps, you have to know where to start from. And so how I looked at all my scenes with Jace and conversations was Ike talking to his younger self. We all have had that question. If you could go back in time and tell yourself what you would do differently, that's how I kind of wanted to look at it. Was this is Ike talking to someone who's in the exact same position that he was, and he wants him to not only follow in those footsteps but go further. So Ike is talking to young Ike. Don't pay attention. Forget the outside noise, all those things that he wishes he would have just followed. And it's part of his grief. It's part of his internal battle. And I'm impressed with my man Isaiah because the chemistry that we had helped me work with Ike and become Ike so smooth. You don't those things don't show on camera if you don't truly care about one another. And I developed a friendship with Isaiah, and I'll be watching him the same way that Ike would watch Jace.
I love that. And Quvenzhané, I wanted to talk about who you wanted Crystal to be as a player, because what's interesting about when we first meet her in the series is that she is recovering from an injury, so we don't get to see her on the court. And yet who she is as a player on the court influences who she is with her friends, with her family, because her family are there every day supporting her career as well. You know, it's something that she's been so passionate about and clearly been working incredibly hard and dedicating her life to for years, even though she's still incredibly young. And so how did you think at the beginning about who she was on the court, what type of player she was, and how you wanted to carry that into your performance in a lot of the scenes with Jace and her family early on?
Well, you partially said it. She's very, very passionate about basketball. Like that's something she loves, and she also knows that the people around her she loves and cares about as well. So I think when I first read everything and Reggie Bythewood, love you, Reggie, he explained to me what Crystal whole love and what she loves, what she likes, what she doesn't like, who she is, what she wants to be. You know, we had a very deep conversation about that. So when we talked and I've researched a lot of female ballers, I just watched how they sit or just how they talk and certain things like that and built Crystal and like her manners and everything she does because it's completely different than me. Like I could just created a whole different person and there were certain things that I could do and couldn't do when we were filming because it was her, you know, like slouching. I had to make sure I was sitting like a certain way to make sure Crystal was Crystal, you know, even if she wasn't on the court, even if she wasn't balling, she still had that swag, she still had the confidence even with an injury, she still would tell Jace, "You can't beat me. Like I'm injured and you still can't beat me." You know, so I made sure that was really important, just with her little mannerisms and the way she talks, the way she moves about herself, and making sure she had that swag even though she was injured or just being off the court.
And then Reggie, I wanted to talk about the way in which you show the game on screen with a lot of the scenes, whether it's we're watching a game and we're watching very specific plays happening tactically within the team, or whether it's the types of drills and practices that they're doing, because it's not just about showing basketball on screen, it's about making sure that every single one of those scenes serves a narrative purpose. When they're doing a drill, it's either about what Jace needs to learn, his relationship with Ike, or what the team as a whole are trying to come together and achieve. And you really managed to make every single one of those scenes stand out narratively. And so when you were working on the scripts, even before you started thinking about how you wanted to film those scenes, how did you make sure that that was always going to be the execution and the intent?
Yeah, well, thanks for picking up on that. I mean, it was very important that the basketball scenes were not just here's basketball, here's an action scene. You know, there was really a beginning, middle, and end to every sequence, and the characters are going after everything in each sequence. So while we spent a lot of time and attention to detail and how we were shooting it, on the choreography, on the training with the basketball playing so it would look great, there was always a deliberate approach in understanding that our characters have wants and needs in all of these sequences. And so we've just stayed mindful of that.
And then Reggie and O'Shea, I wanted to talk a little bit about the masculinity within the show, because basketball often is portrayed as a very hyper masculine space and sport, and yet it doesn't feel that way with this show at all. You know, even a lot of Ike's advice comes from a real place of humility and vulnerability, and even what we were talking about before, where there's so much internal exploration with these characters. And was it really important to you to explore a lot of details like that, even down to the point where, you know, we see Ike at the beginning of a game and he's kissing his ring and he's looking at his wife, and there's a lot of details there as well. Was that something that was a conscious decision with the two of you, particularly with his character?
O'Shea as a person, there's no masculinity in him, and so so I'm just, you know.
Shots fired. Suspect is a Reggie Bythewood.
No, here's the thing. You know, you actually referenced it before. One of the great things about O'Shea also is like the quiet moments. Like some of my favorite moments with him is when he's quiet and you see that he's wrestling with things, you know? And I just really felt it was the thing about Ike, he's guarded. He uses humor at times to deflect, but in our narrative and with the actor, we find moments where we're let in, And I think that's one of the things that's really satisfying about the performance that O'Shea delivers.
Yeah, when one of the things that Reggie saw in me personally, where he even believed in me to be Ike, was how happy I am to be a father of a little girl.
And that was that was the first thing that got me, O'Shea.
Yeah,
You're right. Mm-hmm.
and you a lot of times guys are, we try to take on the world by ourselves, but it's something different when you have uh, women in your life that have lifted you up for so long. My mother, both my grandmothers, my baby sister, and my daughter, they're my world. If any bit of my toughness or aggressiveness ever came out in my life, it was either hearing them in the back of my mind or just having that want to get it done for my family. And I feel that Ike has that same quality. He's about to be a father of a little girl. He's got a strong wife played by Christina Jackson, and even Tessa Ferrer, who ends up being my backbone when it comes to dealing with the shadiness of the amateur youth basketball. Ike looks to these strong females to lift him up. My biggest competitor in the show is probably Jenna Carson. So it is it's the masculinity quality that's in sports. A lot of the strongest men out there in the world, the ladies are more than likely the backbone.
And Quvenzhané, off the back of what Reggie was saying about those moments in the show that sit in the quietness in between, I feel like there's a lot of moments with your character where, particularly she's feeling a little off-centered with her relationship with her coach and hasn't quite figured out how to express that even to Jace, who's her closest friend. And there's the moment where she tries to have a conversation with her mom, but they're having two very different conversations. And so it really does become the moments where she's sitting in the silence in between. And did you find that it just like naturally there were a lot of moments in between the dialogue where Reggie and the other directors just kind of allowed the camera to sit on your performance in that way? Or was that something that you discovered throughout the process of making the show?
I think it just happened naturally. Like there were a lot of moments, especially if it was something emotional. There were a lot of moments where I had to just sit, like even if it wasn't on camera, I just had to sit in my own world and in my emotions and really delve deep into it. And that's why it shows when we do go on camera that there's moments where you can see Crystal kind of thinking like, what do I do now? What do I do next? And that was real, moments like you said with her mom, having those conversations and it didn't add up. It was a moment where she's like, I just tried. So what do I do now? Who do I talk to if I can't even have the same conversation with my mom, So I think it's definitely something that just came naturally, and especially with like me and Reggie when we have like our little process and when we talk, there's definitely moments of just silence and just figuring it out and feeling our way through it because there's a lot of emotion when it comes to Crystal.
And Reggie, in exploring all of the different aspects of the show overall, it also touches upon the fact that these players are commodified at a very young age. You have Ike talking about people that just saw him as a paycheck when he was a teenager, and we're seeing that happen to Jason. And even in the first few episodes, there's a player where his coach wants his mother to sign over guardianship so that he can have full autonomy over his career. And, obviously the show being based on a lot of Kevin Durant's own experiences, but I imagine that there was a wealth of research in different spaces and different players' journeys that you had the opportunity to look at. And so what did that scope of research within the industry look like for you in finding a lot of those aspects and those minute details, and then figuring out how to bring them into a show, but a way that it always leads by character rather than facts?
Well, one of our writers, a guy named George Dorman, wrote this book called "They Play Their Hearts Out," and he's a journalist, and he followed this youth basketball team for several years, and elite players, and it just like everything imaginable happened to these kids, and they were seen as commodities, and it was really like the worst side of what youth sports could be, you know. So we really, you know, researched a lot in that area, and then it was also very important for us to research another area where, you know, just even as a father who has, you know, children to play sports, you know, my kids have had some incredible coaches, and they've had some not so incredible coaches, you know. So it's just really interesting. It's like always just trying to understand, you know, Mara at the age of 14, or character Jace is, has some historical context, and like really went back to looking at Emmett Till, August 28th, 1955. He was murdered and arguably sparked the civil rights movement. But I always just use Emmett as like a just sort of like a consciousness, if you will, for our show. And then always as a reminder that really what we're doing in this narrative is asking ourselves, how do we treat kids in this country, in our community? And so that was just always a lingering question that we explored throughout the season.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting aspect with the character of Crystal. So Quvenzhané and Reggie, I was interested in the way that both of you wanted to really showcase a female athlete who is at the top of her game, and you know, with the fact that she is best friends with Jace, and he's getting all of this attention, and like you said, you know, she could beat him on the court even when she's got an injury, and she knows it, but yet she's not getting that same attention and commodification. And so, how did the two of you, through the character of Crystal, really also want to have a dialogue about female athletes within the industry?
I mean, I think one of the great things about our process, you know, Quvenzhané had to spend months and months of, you know, learning how to really become a baller. And you don't go through a process like that without helping, sort of like finding your character as well. So, you know, our trainer, Reggie Wallace, really worked very closely with Quvenzhané, and she, you know, it's great because she didn't have to fake her swagger. You know, she's just really balling out. And I think that there it's a very interesting thing about her character. And one of the reasons why we cast Quvenzhané is because while her character has like a lot of obstacles and traumatic things happening, we also are like trying to figure out a way to do it where she just didn't come off as a victim, but somebody who had to push through something. So I just think that you know, from my side, you were mindful of that. We talked a lot, but then she's such a great actress. A lot of what I just really look to do is to stay out of the way.
Thank you, Reggie. This is why I love you, because you just always butter me up. But no, I definitely agree with that. Like, I spent a lot of time working, like physically, mentally, emotionally, just researching, and just any opportunity I had to be Crystal, I took, or any opportunity I had to study and learn and build, I took. So like Reggie said, I became Crystal at one point, especially working with Reggie Wallace, the trainer. I was working so much that he called me Crystal. You know, I was Crystal, and I just created this whole person. It wasn't even a character; it was a whole new person that I was and still am. You know, so I definitely developed that swagger. It just came naturally.
And then for you, O'Shea, it's interesting because it's not just about the dynamics of figuring out his moves as a player, because there are moments where we see you interacting with the players on court or setting up drills, but also a lot of aspects of who a coach is. It's what are his reaction shots when he's on the sidelines, because he knows exactly the play that's happening. And there's a lot that you really need to pull into your performance in those moments as well. And so what was kind of your research and journey into finding a lot of the minutia and nuances of him as a coach in that way?
Because I've coached my little brother before, and I know that stress on the sideline. I know what it's like to practice for 2 hours, 2 days before, and then just you have no control on whether or not it works. And, you know, following the ball, making sure, you know, people are setting the picks in the right way, making sure your big man is down low when the shot's up. Like all those things, it's a continuous, you know, just thing that you have to do of just watching piece by piece. You know, a fan might just focus on where the ball is, but a coach, you have to make sure all the pieces on the chessboard are doing what they're supposed to do. Because if it doesn't work, parents are looking at you. Jenna Carson is coming down there to chew you out. So you have to have, you know, all your ducks in a row. And if they aren't, you got to get them there. And it is, you know, it's a stressful part of basketball that doesn't get a lot of shine. You know, I can only imagine, you know, me being an actor, what it's like being a director, watching every single job on set, Reg. You know, I know it's probably a different level of stress, and I just wanted to add that. And those were the moments where, like Reg said, it's a quiet storm happening. You know, I have to at the same time keep face for my team so they know that I haven't lost confidence in them, but internally I might be thinking, you know, Phil, I need you to get down there on them boards. It's definitely it was some of my funnest days on Swagger were those reaction scenes. I love hyping up my boys. I miss my team, and I love when they do great. And then there's a part of me that loved telling them when they did bad. But yeah, that all that from Ike came from personal experience of loving the game, watching the game, being a coach before, being a player before, and just trying to keep up the energy so it feels like we rocking in there.
You know,
And
Mara, I think one of the fun things with O'Shea as well, like he just came ready to play because while we did have choreography and we did have set, agendas in terms of what was supposed to happen with the basketball, sometimes things didn't go right, and we just kept the cameras rolling and he stayed with it. One of my, sort of favorite, O'Shea Ike moments is that one-on-one basketball game and we see in a pilot between Jace and Ike because while there was some choreography, there were some things that went wrong, and then O'Shea starts making shots he wasn't supposed to make, and so and we just went with it, and so a lot of it is, hey, we know we need this reaction from you, but sometimes it was just like just stay ready, and he just stayed in the moment, and we got a lot of great surprises.
yeah,
Mhm.
well, Reggie, with the fact that you directed that first episode as well, I wanted to talk about a lot of the visual aesthetic choices that you make because you really bring the camera into the center of the court and right in the middle of the players, and there's a lot of kind of sweeping motions where the camera kind of like comes in towards characters and kind of
Mhm,
gives us the wider landscape, but then gives us those individual character moments as well. And then
mhm,
as the show progresses, there's also moments where you slow down time a little bit and play with the pacing. So there's a real stylistic approach to it and also a real pacing and rhythm to all of those scenes. And
mhm.
what was the journey and process of really figuring out every single individual beat of what those scenes were going to look like, both in terms of filming them and in post production, where I imagine a lot of those beats landed?
Well, first off, we came with a mission statement. And it's interesting for us when you say episodes, because for us, we didn't call it episodes, we called it mazes, right? The opening image of Swagger is a hand-drawn maze that Jace's father gives him. So just even cinematically, it kept in mind, like life is not a straight line. It has twists and turns, obstacles and opportunities. It's a maze. And so cinematically, I wanted to approach the game that way. And so it was not, didn't want to shoot it in a sort of conventional way where it's just all these quick cuts, but really how fluid can we make it? How much can we see and how much of the maze can we see and not just spectate the maze, but be in the maze? So, without giving away all of our cinematic tricks, we definitely look to do, longer takes when we could. And the other thing that made that critical was just that our players had to really ball out, and the fact that they were actually able to really make the shots, and the dunking is not fake, and it's not 9 foot, 8 foot where we kept it 10 feet, and so the fact that we were able to just really have authentic play allowed us to have this cinematic, maze approach.
Yeah. And lastly, for each of you, I wanted to ask about what it is that you feel you had the opportunity to really learn creatively from working on this project. And Quvenzhané, I'm going to come to you first for this one.
For me, Crystal's entire storyline taught me a lot. Because I put in so much work It wasn't just something that I had already or just developing a character and then putting it on screen. I worked so hard, physically, like nonstop, becoming a baller, mentally as well. But I think that that's my thing. Like it took a lot of it was a big challenge, but it was a challenge I was willing to take, and it took a lot of energy, but I gave it my all, and I did any and everything I could to be Crystal and put that out there for everyone to see and for everyone to relate to. Anything that Crystal has, anything that they can pull from it, just being young and a woman, being a young Black woman, just being young, just, being a baller, being a female baller, any and everything that you could pull from her. Definitely.
And O'Shea?
Swagger really taught me as an actor how to endure. It is Swagger had so many things at one time going against it. And we came together and as a crew had to endure and find a way to make it happen, to get done. And I've done films, and I'll be on filming for 2 at most 3 months. But before I even got to Swagger, they were already locked and loaded, and it was a family that had to accept me in. And once we got the ball rolling on what we were doing, then we get hit with a pandemic, and it's just another thing for us to overcome together. And then filming during a pandemic, and just everything that entailed, and how we all adapted, but we didn't, it wasn't an individual effort. It was something that we built together. And you can't endure anything without the people around you, without a tight group around you. And I've made friends on sets before, but not like this. My team, those gold jerseys, I care about them. My assistant coach, Sean Baker, Tessa Ferrer, Chanel, Christina, like we are a crew, and it's a beautiful feeling. I see why people and cast from other series get so attached, but I know that if I get my crew back together, we're unstoppable because we endured it all.
And lastly, for you, Reggie?
Well, I mean, I think that they speak to, I mean, when we talk about family, I mean, this project really reinforced how the process is as important as a finished product. And I think our process, the way that we were able to trust each other and come together, really gave us a great product. I mean, I came into this project looking to be, creator and showrunner, and the circumstances really pushed me to be a leader. The day that the pandemic hit and we're dealing with it, and O'Shea says, "Hey, Reg, I trust you." I'm like, what? Why you trust me? Yeah. And so it really challenged me to step up, and O'Shea is right. We have so many great crew and cast members, and just we have some really amazing unsung heroes, which is the moms and dads. A lot of moms on our set. Quvenzhané's mom, like they all held it down, and quite frankly, really made our family dynamic work.
When you watch the show, all of the work that you've done off screen really comes through. There's so much detailing at every single moment. So congratulations on a fantastic series. And thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for a great interview. Appreciate it.
Thank you.